Dear Earthmates, we are visiting a poet in Norway, but he's from Hazaristan, and Kamran Mir Hazar. Thank you for accepting the invitation, and thank you for hosting us. Dear Kamran Mir Hazar, you have showed us a wonderful book, and yes, poems for the Hazara, an anthology and collaborative poem. Yes, 125 poets from how many countries?
68.
68 countries. Wow, what a huge project. Congratulations and thank you.
Welcome.
Why are you in exile in a way?
I've been into exile for a long time, since my childhood. So I am from a group of people, indigenous people called Hazara, and they are primarily from Hazaristan. But since the 19th century, systematic crimes started against the Hazaras, and generations, many of them forced to flee. They went to neighboring countries and to find safe places. So they faced genocide, forced displacement, systematic discrimination, even slavery. So I am one of them. So I used to live in exile, like my grandmother, grandfather, and then fighting against this kind of crimes, and then forced apart, forced to flee. So yeah, and why I am here in Norway, because I live in Norway. I'm here since 2007. I was in Kabul. I was running a very popular online media outlet called Kabul Press as the editor and publisher, but from the very critical perspective, criticizing the government, criticizing and also revealing the documents of corruption by high rankings. So the government, the security forces, they didn't like it. So they captured me twice, tortured me, and I forced to leave the country. So first I went to India with my wife, and then to Norway here. And now Norway is my country, is like my country. But yeah, my second country.
Yeah. Norway, I have many, a number of Norwegian friends and friends who are there. And Norway is a country of second chance, they say, and it's a wonderful approach, welcoming approach. So when you were tortured, who was, I mean, the government, who was in government?
The security forces. It was a kind of NDS, National Security Directory, something like that. So they captured me. It was a few days after I was invited in Presidential Palace. I was surprised why I was invited. They invited me to read poems. So, and they invited me, and I went there, and on the stage, I didn't start reading poems, but I started criticizing Hamid Karzai that he gathered a bunch of criminals, war criminals around himself and corrupt people. So, and here we have lots of documents indicating the millions of dollars corruptions and many drug dealers like that around him. So, and then I just read something that's okay. The poem, if my poems cannot go outside of this palace, then it's not a poem. So I like the poem, and I left the palace. This is I told this is not the man that we want as the president, and I left the palace. And a few days after, so they just captured me. I was in my office, and I went outside for a while to buy something, and then they just from different direction they attacked me and then pushed me to the car and first to a place, was waiting there for a while, and then to a detention center with a small room and with some members of Taliban, so together and with Taliban, so they are also in somehow they wanted to disappear me, not and then the government. So they after a few days they forced to release me, but they were spying around my office for 2 months, and then I decided to go out. I was just inside. I couldn't go outside. But after a few 2 months, I decided to go, and then they immediately came and captured again. So and then after my release, they forced to release me because it was a very special situation in Kabul. But I got the information from the human rights activists if I stay. So next time they might just fire on me or as unknown people. So it's very dangerous. So I and my wife, we left Kabul to India, first in India and then Norway.
And people from various parts of the world may not know, but I remember in 1979, the Soviet invasion. I remember I was a youngster, and then Taliban, and after the first period of Taliban, when you had to leave Hazaristan, which is at present a part of Afghanistan, isn't it?
So it is the historical Hazaristan, according to before the great genocide of Hazara, the last decade of 19th century, it was from one direction, it was Kandahar, a big part of Kandahar, and then to the north, Mazar-e-Sharif, and from another direction, from starting from Kabul to Herat, from east to the west. It was a very big area, but more than 60% of the Hazara population were massacred by Afghans. They captured Hazara, invaded Hazara lands. Many were sold as slaves and many forced to flee. And this kind of systematic crime, after that, the Hazara, they became a kind of second and third class people. They didn't have any other rights, just to do some law works, for example, laborers. Systematic discrimination in one period in 20th century, for instance, when the Afghans, they wanted to have a kind of brotherhood with Nazis of Germany, for instance, more pressure on the Hazara, more Hazara land invaded. And then it's continued until the last decade of 20th century when Taliban came. Taliban, when we talk about Taliban, they are in somehow repeated in the history. Those people you see, a bunch of people, they are in Kabul, sitting there, having power. They are actually the same people, not the mindset is the same. They came from 19th century, or nothing has changed, just their weapons has changed. So, and in the last decade of 20th century, for instance, in Mazar Sharif, thousands of Hazaras were massacred in a few days. And after that, they started massacring in other parts of the Hazaristan, in Yakaulang, in Bamiyan, and also they destroyed two biggest or highest standing Buddhas of Hazaristan in Bamiyan in March 2001. So, and then after that, the Karzai, and then this corrupt person, this Ashraf Ghani, Ahmad Zai, they also had a kind of systematic discrimination, a plan for systematic discrimination against
Hazara. During the first periods of Taliban, there were massacres and oppression. And after the Taliban regime, it somehow continued in a way.
Yeah.
So you had to leave. When you had to leave, it was not Taliban who was in power.
No, it was many, over 100,000 international soldiers in Kabul, NATO there. So it's so international community there, billions of dollars there, aid from international community there. But in that period, I had to leave the country. So, and then beside, one interesting thing is that being a critical, someone kind of a journalist or activist, or it's one thing. And when you put other also social locations beside together, there is a place that they intersect. There is a very good theory, and it came from the Black movements of America, intersectionality. So these social locations, those social locations intersects and put you in a weaker position. For example, the man who captured me, chained my hand, he told me that it's not the time that the Hazara criticize government. So pointing to my ethnic background, and then pointing to my work as a journalist. So these several locations intersect and puts in a weaker position. Yeah, it is very difficult to be a Hazara. It's almost considered a crime to be a Hazara in that so-called Afghanistan.
I see. A Jewish friend of mine, a composer, Daniel Galai, would like to organize an international conference on ethnicity, because he says, on one hand, it's a good thing to have a world society, but on the other hand, some ethnic good points, plus points, let's say, are crushed or left out, etc. So how can we, would you be interested in such a conference? Would you like to? Yeah.
Because, yeah, of course.
Yeah, wonderful. And because the thing is, national governments, so-called national governments, are a bit scared of ethnicities, or they're uncomfortable. We see that in Turkey too, about our Kurdish citizens, especially because they are a large number of our Kurdish citizens. And I think denial cannot be a solution. If something, if some people say, okay, this is what I think, this is who I am, banning, prohibiting does not solve anything. It brings more pain. Okay, let's see our differences and let's learn from each other. And through doing good things together, we can all learn from each other and change if we want to. I mean, well, unfortunately, you know, Alexander the Great, he cut the Gordian knot, and you know, there was this knot. It was difficult to what's the word, untie or whatever.
Untie.
So he simply cut it with his sword. I think he's a negative example. People sometimes say, usually, how clever he was, you know, he cut. But real social problems, cultural problems cannot be solved like that with a sword. No, you have to be careful to untangle. Let's untangle each other, actually. Let's open our hearts, minds. And so that's why dialogue is, which is easier said than done, by the way, but that's important. And
yeah, this I'm certainly interested in that conference you say. The Hazara, I consider the Hazara not anymore as a ethnic group, but as a stateless nation. The Hazara seems to be a part of a nation, but it is not considered as with equal rights as other people in the same country. So stateless all the time, stateless all the time.
And there are about 8 million Hazara in that place, in the country. I mean, that's rough. That's what I read on Wikipedia before I talked.
Yeah, you read on Wikipedia. It is very interesting about the numbers, majority, minority. They always say Hazaras in mass media, international reports or something like that, that Hazara are minority group. But really, based on what data? There's no any data. You cannot find any reliable data. The Afghani government that they like to say that sometimes more than 70% of the country's populations are Pashtuns. So they say that, for instance, the whole population is about 32 for instance, millions, but UNICEF says, for example, 38 millions. UNDP says something different. So there's no any reliable data. For example, Afghani politician Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai, who he used to say that, for example, in Bamiyan, there are 100,000 people only. So, but when we put the numbers together, for example, the number of the people who voted in the last elections, over 150,000. Number of students, children between 7 and 18, over 200,000. The kids less than 7 years old who got vaccination, so over 100,000, for instance. Many people couldn't vote. Many children cannot go to school. Many children could not get vaccination, and many left Bamiyan. So when we put those data together, we say that it is about 1 million, the population of Bamiyan. But the Afghani, the media, the politician, international community, sometimes that they back the oppressed regime of this oppressing regime of Afghanistan. So they like to say they are minority. And then they like to make it even less by pointing that they are Shias. So they are minority, and then more minority, they are Shias. And then, but we know that we are more than that. We know that we have also millions of Hazaras. They are not Shias. There are many non-believers even, and of course, the majority of Shias are Hazaras, of course, but we have also millions of non-Shia Hazaras. But in this international relations, and then the Afghani relationship with the world, so they like to make non-Pashtuns minority, particularly the Hazaras, because they have borders, they captured, invaded most parts of the Hazara land. So I like to consider the Hazara as a stateless nation, and then pointing this that they deserve, they have rights to have this, to determine their own life, their own fate. Self-determination is their rights. So we are looking for the ways to return, to take back this self-determination, the right that we had until the last decade of 19th century. I personally do not recognize Afghanistan. I am not Afghan. It's a fake identity, fake name for my country. So the name of one ethnic group that they invaded most of the of Hazara land, not only the Hazara land, but also the Uzbek, the Turkmen, the Tajiks also, and then put this name on the whole country, and then they're running. You can't find in last 120 years, you can't find one single long-term project to in somehow bring peace, development in that country. All the time, war, systematic discrimination, genocide, forced displacement. And this international community like to say they like to count the war in that country, that big hell in the war from the Cold War. So they like to say it was, for example, in last decade, it was war, started war. And before that, it was wonderful. But it's not like that. This what the mass media, these international politicians like to say is totally different than the reality on the ground there.
I see. How about the language? Mm-hmm. Will you please give some information about the language? Is it a Hazari language?
There is a debate. First of all, a few months ago, a group of Hazara, they released a charter called Hazaristan Charter. This charter acts as the theoretical, philosophical ground for the relations of the Hazara with Hazara with other people and with the world. And in that charter, it has defined that there are two languages, Hazaragi, and then the other one is Persian Dari. So two different languages. So as I know that with Hazaragi, it is like the one of the languages in Norway. We have Nynorsk here and Bokmål here, and Nynorsk is a kind of structured local dialects in Norway. It is putting them in the shared grammatical structure, beside the other one that share many things with Danish, with Swedish, maybe. So this is Dari, a kind of, or Persian Dari is like Bokmål, and then and the other one, Hazaragi, is like Nynorsk, that it's structured dialect of the different parts of Norway. So there are two languages we consider them now.
I have never heard anything in Hazari language.
Mm-hmm.
Would you kindly say a few things?
Yeah, I can read the poem for you.
Please.
One of my poems.
Wonderful.
It is, just a second. I need just to open. It is very difficult. Dobaiti, you know Dobaiti and the classical Persian language literature. So Dobaiti is very popular. And in Hazaragate, Dobaiti, it's a classical form, one of the classical form. It's very popular. Yes, but in Hazaragate, the new verses, the free verses, it's something new. I try to discover, I try to bring some new forms into this language, Hazaragate. Here was a very, it's a long poem, but I read a part of that. The title is باچه دل خورد در دریا پرتکده آتی قملم شیره ماخ کرد آبی بسراغ را در دیسشی دده اخرشی لزیر وری مخت خو اخره باچه خوره ماخ کرد آبی روی د آسمو گشتنده خدایش را قسم داده توش کده خون باچه خو رهی کد خدایش را گندک قدقنچی او کتگون اندیوال شی دویده یگان دفعه چوب رقم دیگر دفعه پشت اولجی شب شیره دنبال کده تا کتل باچه دل خورد در دریا پرتکده برگوج وری از کتل بال شد باچه سون آبادی تخ کرد آبیم آتیم کتگون. This was a part of a poem in Hazaragi. And it is difficult for non-Hazara to understand it. And even a part of Hazara, it is difficult to understand.
Derya is sea, isn't it?
It is
one of the words.
And the river. So it is, we use that also river. You know that we live up on the mountains, 5,000 meters up. So, and then we have rivers there. The source of many big rivers in that region are from Hazaristan. Yeah, so we call them Darya.
Thank you so much. I'm learning a lot from you. Thank you. How about, how did your love with poetry start? I mean, what happened? Why did you become a poet? Well, I think we are both crazy, I'm sure. That's why we are poets.
Yeah.
But still, it's a question easy to ask, and let the person suffer while trying to answer.
You tell me first.
Oh, well, I don't know. I started and I enjoyed it. I like it. I feel some 35 years ago, a journal asked some writers, poets, why do you write? And I gave the shortest answer. It makes me feel better. That's all.
Let me tell you, when I was a kid, so I used to write something, Ghazal. So, and at that time, I was maybe 14, 15, and then a teenager, and I couldn't find the right form of Ghazal. but I tried. And then I used to go to backside of a TV. Now I was less than that actually, behind the TV, and then telling the other members of the family, can you see me inside this television, and start reading that. I was a kid actually. And then later when I was a teenager, then I started writing, finding that, okay, here is the form, here are some rules that I need to follow them. And after a while, after writing some classical, which is very important, so I started writing, no, it's enough with classical. So now it's time to break the rules. So, yeah.
Yes. Do you focus on poetry, or are there other genres that you also play with, let's say?
No, the primary things that I'm working, the art, not the art. Sometimes because people like to consider literature as a part of art, but I don't like it. It's self a kind of standing kind of art.
Poetry,
Art,
right?
or yeah, poetry, yeah.
Yes, yes.
No, it's poetry, only poetry, yeah. But I read a lot. I read a lot, and I take a lot. And I believe that in poetry, we are somehow in competition with other arts. For example, we are in competition with a photographer, with a graphist, with, for example, a movie maker, because when I watch a movie, so there are some techniques that I know that if for myself, if I repeat those techniques, then it's a kind of copying from the movie maker. So what is a better one or a new technique? So I feel that we are like a poet. I am when I write a poem. So the new one that I wanted to write, it should be totally different than the previous one. So it's a kind of the poet himself or herself is in competition with himself or herself, and at the same time is in competition with other the photographer, movie maker, writer, or yeah.
We like
So that
challenges. We like challenges.
it makes more challenging. And recently, in recent years, I became interested in technology to learn more about technology. I studied management information systems.
Wonderful.
So, and I like to bring the digital concept from the information technology, information system into the poetry. So, and I like it. So I like, and then work a little bit on that one, process a little bit more, mix it with the maybe the metaphysical uh, space that I have already, and then maybe probably forming a new thing.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I have a problem with reading novels. This is the first time I'm admitting this.
Okay.
I mean, some novels I love and I have read them.
Okay.
And I can read, I will read. But usually, when I look at a novel or a longish story, I start cutting out sentences in my mind. Unnecessary, unnecessary. This poetic discipline gives us this tendency to passion to concentrate on words and getting rid of what we think unnecessary. So I think a good poet may not be a good novel reader. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that it is dependent to the background of the person, but you read a lot. So when maybe it's like this, I can imagine a kind of a scenario like this, that you read a novel and then you have a good background, you already read a lot. So, and and you are reading all the time. So, and here, when you start reading a novel, for instance, so okay, this is a kind of there's nothing new, nothing new, nothing new, nothing new. So, just and then one line new, one line maybe, and sometimes you find maybe that it could be much better if you turn it like this, and then going forward a little bit, and then, okay, this part is good. Okay, this part is good. And for me personally, a good novel, a good poem even, is a poem that pushed me to write a poem.
Exactly.
So
that's right.
that,
we want to be provoked. We want to be
right, exactly.
challenged, and so that it can. So actually, almost since my childhood, I read in order to write. At a certain point in my life, I looked at myself. Well, living is like that too, and etc. But wow, I don't know. I cannot see the time here for some reason. I don't know what. Let's see. I think we are soon. But we should be alarmed about the time limit.
I think you're going to say we are in 19th century or 18th century now. I can't see, but I think that it's 17th century. So, okay.
What would you like to say to Earthmates with various cultural backgrounds, histories, suffering, and mistakes, and reasons of happiness at the same time? What would you like to say? What else?
You know, I wanted to tell them that there are peoples, millions of peoples are still suffering, and the world is ignoring them. So being victims, many, it's not a number. People are not numbers. And there are people suffering since 19th centuries, every sort of systematic crimes. And now it's enough. We should look at the Hazara of Hazaristan, one of the most persecuted people in the world, suffering genocide, still ongoing genocide. Still, they are invading the lands. Still, they are forcing them to flee. Still, they are facing systematic discrimination. So, and still, the world, even sometimes international human rights organizations, they don't look at them, they ignore them. And I feel that there is something political behind that, some political reasons behind that. So I like people, I like diversity, I respect every human being. And I ask them to look at the Hazara of Hazaristan also, because we are billions of people, and millions of us are suffering, and it shouldn't be like this.
I see. And there is this interaction between this diversity and while at the same time a world society is in progress at the same time. That is interesting, very interesting. And thank you so much. This is one of the Earth Civilization dialogues, and we are not putting a period or a full stop, just a comma. And I want to say that we are together, and let's do things together,
sure.
separately and together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dear Earthmate, our Earthmate from Hazaristan, Kamran Mir Hazar, has shared his knowledge and rich points from his life. And thank you so much. We thank him. We thank you. We are together.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.